Chapter 7. Caught from the Wind. She did not fly far, only far enough for the air to rinse thought and duty from her skin. The mountains were the familiar dark grammar of her life. The morning had sharpened them into legible lines. She traced the ridge once, twice, large again, alone again, and was turning home when a human sound knifed up through wind. It was not fear. It was the other kind of cry the body makes when it insists on finishing what it started. One that was still so freshly remembered from her own mouth. Elisa banked and came down on a shelf of rock the colour of old iron. A girl had made a nest for herself behind a boulder, skirts bunched under, back braced, face set in that patient fury women learn without instruction. She looked up once at the emerald that blocked the sky and did not flinch, too busy to waste breath on astonishment. Eliza folded the world back into a woman between one breath and the next, knelt, and put her own cloak beneath the girl's hips in one decisive tug. "I've got you," she said. "Breathe. Look at me. You are not alone." They did the work that has always made midwives out of whoever happens to be present with the optimism and dread of one decidedly not ready for the role. Elisa's hands were steady. The girls were clever at clutching her skirts when the next wave broke over her spine. The mountain made a windbreak of Elisa's body and pretended it had planned that all along. When the small head crowned Eliza laughed, not because any of this was funny, but because joy sometimes insists. And a heartbeat later, a little girl arrived furious and wet and loud enough to scold the weather for presumption. Elisa wiped the child with a fold of her cloak, laid her warm onto her mother's chest, and only then felt it. Her own power dimming as if someone had turned down a lamp at the wall. Not an injury. A quieting. The small inner furnace by which she kept scale and storm in conversation eased itself back 3 steps and refused to be coaxed forward as easily as it usually did while the baby lay in the circle of her arms. "Oh," she said under her breath, surprised, looking at the baby girl. "You silence me." The girl heard nothing beyond her child. When breath returned between aftershocks, words followed, fragmentary, as all honest stories begin. She had been walking toward High Pass because she had heard they were kind there to women with babies and might need a wet nurse, or a pair of hands that did not mind laundry. The father had been a young lord hiding in her father's hayloft the summer the king's men were searching the byroads for someone. He had been curious, not cruel, and she had been the same, which is the sort of math that adds without legal sanction. "He promised to come back for me," she said placidly, not pleading, not defending. "Perhaps he will. Perhaps he won't. People sometimes mean it when they promise, and then sometimes the world forgets to let them." A thin locket lay against her throat on a cord, cheap tin trying to be silver. Elisa had noticed it earlier as one notices a draught in a room. She touched it now and felt the faintest breath of working magic there, more like a name remembered than a spell. "His," the girl said, eyes following her fingers. "It doesn't open." Elisa made a soft sound that did not commit itself to opinion. If it is honest magic, it may be waiting for the right hands. Or for a moment, that is not this one. The baby rooted and wailed her indignation at there being anything in the world not instantly obedient. She watched quietly how the girl led the baby to nurse with confidence. "I have a dozen siblings," she muttered to the child. "I know what you need." Elisa thought then of the nest, of the 2 new infants, and the women who had carried them, of dragons being entirely insufficient in the matter of milk, of a princess with councils to sit, and a baby with no respect for councils. "We have a need of you, as a wet nurse. There are 2 babies in need of milk, and only 1 mother able to provide. You look strong enough to handle 2 1/2, she said, simple as placing a stone where it belongs. "If you wish, we will provide you with work, food, a room with a bolt I can wedge with my back, and women who will neither ask cruel questions nor tolerate cruel answers. A home for both you and your child." The girl blinked, obliging her to be precise in where this glimmer of hope was. The dragon's nest, keep above High Pass, my home. But you need to be brave to take my offer. You would need to ride there in my hands, Elisa said. The large ones. Talons, she added cheerfully, holding out her cupped human hands to show how. The girl looked at her, the green in her eyes brighter now the baby had taken the edge off pain, and lifted her chin. It is still you, small or large, she said. You did not eat me when you had no reason to not do so. You will not drop me now that I am to become useful. Smart girl, Elisa approved. Let us go then. She wrapped the pair of them in her cloak until they were a neat bundle with only the girl's exhausted face and a little nose visible. She stood and walked a short way from the rock, because some changes are better done without trampling those she had sworn to protect, then let bone and heat resume their proper size. When she turned and laid out her giant palms, the girl came forth without fear and adjusted herself into the cradle made by Elisa's cupped foreclaws, as if she had always travelled mountain paths this way. Eliza lifted them with the unshowy care of a woman who had carried breakables across a crowded room and knew how not to think about it thereafter. The flight back was a sequence of held breaths and held muscles. Wind tried to be clever and discovered it preferred to be kind. The nest's flat rooftop terrace, made to take her weight, expanded to meet them as intended. Elisa set both palms down like offering bowls and opened them. The girl slept, the baby asleep on her, both of them arranged into the pure geometry exhaustion makes. There was a strip of milk at the baby's lip. There was a streak of mountain dust on the girl's cheek. Alaris, who had come rushing to meet her, made a noise that might have been a prayer and bent automatically to lift the little bundle into human arms. "Where did you find them?" he whispered, as if a dragon might be shy about her errands. "On the ridge that faces the old goat path," Elisa said, screaming at the wind. Lady Lyanna materialized from the door like common sense given a body. She looked once and the entire weight of a household shifted to accommodate what she decided. "Wake the little midwife," she said. "Heat water." "Elisa, stop being large." "Alaris, stop being tragic. Give the child to Eliza and carry the girl instead. We will place her in the small room next to the nursery." The small midwife arrived in the girl's new tiny bedchamber, took one glance and set her hands to work. "Healthy," she said. "Hungry. And you," she added to the girl without preamble, "are smart. You did all things that needed to be done. Rest. If anyone asks you questions that would make you cry, tell them my name, and I will sort it." Annalena came to the threshold, hair unpinned, the ungovernable grace of the newly delivered in her walk. Katarin stood a step behind before being shooed away from this gathering of women by Elisa. Eliza flexed her fingers once as she pushed him and Alaris out of the door. "The child quiets me," she said to Katarin in passing. Katarin filed it away for something to be investigated later, but both forgot as more pressing matters took the stage. Lady Lyanna had already moved from orders to comfort. "You came for work. You will have it. For now you have a bed, a bowl, and someone to put opinions back into throats should they let them out, unwarily." The girl's hand went to her locket without thinking. "He promised to come back," she said again, not pleading, merely clarifying to those who did not yet know. "If he is worth anything, he will find you here," Lady Lyanna said kindly. "If he is not, you will have a life that does not require him to come." The baby hiccuped, untroubled by philosophy, and opened her mouth to declare hunger. The girl fed her again and then asked, "You needed a wet nurse for 2 more?" Eliza brought in her own baby girl from the nursery in the next room and handed her gratefully to the young woman. The girl, blinking at the speed with which the nest had turned itself into a harbour, took the baby and guided her to latch. Eliza watched with fascination and satisfaction at her, and felt she had found a treasure lying on the ground. Annalena smiled. My son is happy for now, but once my healing is over, I will not be able to offer the schedule he needs and keep up with my duties. I will have to rely on you then. The room was filled with a feeling of family, despite the fact that the four women shared no blood and had very different stations in life. The girl nursing Elisa's child whispered then, "Perhaps now is the time for names. My name is Solara. It is not what my parents called me. They called me the third girl on a good day and an insolent little rat on a bad one. Solara is what he named me, when he learnt I never had a proper name." The others smiled and introduced themselves in turn. Solara felt that there was something odd about how little their titles that invariably came with names unnerved her. She was in the presence of a duchess, a princess and a dragon nursing the dragon's baby, and she felt that she was where she was meant to be. Home. As a third small cry braided itself into the house's fabric, and the nest, greedy as all good homes, made room without creaking. Chapter 8. Prophecies at Play. The nest did what good houses do when years are asked of them. It settled its stones more deeply into the mountain and taught its roof to remember the weight of snow without resenting it. What had been built as a refuge became a home because people insisted upon it daily. They named the children simply. Katarin and Annalena's boy took Marius. Eliza put Raina on her daughter's plaque. The girl who had arrived in a dragon's hands said her daughter should be Rif, for her father was Raphael, she said, apologetic despite herself. Solara began as wet nurse because milk is a language of its own, and there were 3 infants at once who needed food. Annalena taught her letters and numbers in passing. The nest taught her everything else. She listened, duplicated what worked, corrected what did not, and learned the secret mathematics of a house by careful observation. By the time third winter had taught the goats to stand exactly where the morning found them, Solara had quietly become the heart steward of the dragon's nest. When she gave an order, people discovered they had wanted to do the work all along, so when Annalena placed the nest's ledgers and storeroom keys into her hands one fine spring morning, it was a mere formality, denoting something that had already come to pass. Lady Lyanna made a habit of wintering at High Pass, the way some women make a habit of wearing pearls. All 3 children called her Granny before anyone remembered to ask if they should, and Lady Lyanna did not correct it because life is short, and the right names are as much a right as people choose them to be. She chose to be grandmother to all 3 with great joy. She only counted the days until they would be old enough to come with her to the north for summers and have her own house full of children's laughter again. The nest's song changed key from season to season and held. On a spring morning 5 winters after the storm-wrapped night, the 3 children played in the inner court, where water found its drains no matter how much the sky tried to meddle. Rif stacked flat stones into a tower whose purpose only she understood and scolded anyone who mistook it for a game. Raina pursued her own shadow around the paving and occasionally caught it, to the shadow's great scandal. Marius coaxed a curl of breeze into turning a windmill someone had made of scrap paper, stick, pin, and stubbornness, and when it obeyed, he did not preen. He simply made it go faster because a thing should do at least 2 tricks before you call it trained. The oracle came without being announced, but recognized nonetheless. She was smaller than fear and larger than caution. Her hair had given up on being anything except itself, and the lines around her mouth had been carved by laughing and telling people what they did not always want to hear. She was aging, but not yet old. Yet, when one looked into her eyes, one realized she was older than any of the 4 kingdoms. In those eyes fates braided, and destinies diverged endlessly, leaving the looker feeling hopelessly lost. "Tea, please, your majesty," she said to Solara in passing. Solara brought it and did not ask questions about the odd address that only she had heard. She forgot about it by the time tea was handed over, for surely it was just a jest. They were all gathered because someone long awaited had come precisely at the right time. The oracle did not sit. She looked at the children before she looked at anyone else, as those who remember priorities always do. She put the pad of one finger to Rafe's brow and smiled like a craftsman admiring a clean line. She left her finger there long enough for Raina to try to catch it, which she did, and the old woman let it be caught and shook it carefully, as if greeting a small monarch. She put her palm over the centre of Marius's chest without touching him, and the windmill on the stone bench turned itself politely toward her hand. "Good," she said, and then, to ease the minds of all those holding their breath, "and not too early." She looked at Rhianna and nodded as if speaking to a colleague in a trade both knew better than to brag about. "You carry a dragon," she said. "She is polite enough to wait until your bones are ready to hold the conversation, which is more courtesy than some I have known. She will wake soon, and loudly, because some things do not whisper when a shout will do. When she does, you will need your mother most. The first words of your mother's language are best learned from the one who has it in her bones." She turned to Marius. "And you," she said, her mouth approvingly straight. "You have been careful, and the sky likes careful children. Your power will take its boots off soon and run indoors without asking. When it does, you will need your father most. He has already learned to tell storms to sit and stay. Holding on to your little friend will keep you safe while you learn. Do not be too proud to lean on her." "And the third," she said, and looked at Riff with all the formality one saves for queens and toddlers. "You will not call fire or wake a sleeping beast. What you carry is the space around magic. You are the pause before a song. Grow strong and clever. The others will need you on the journey first to a place and then to a time where 4 kingdoms meet. On that journey you will find your father, and you can judge for yourself if he is worth acknowledging." Solara's hand went to her locket on its old cord without thought. It had learned to be warm again over the last year, the way some promises learn to hum once they are pointed toward being kept. Eliza saw and did not say anything, because kindness is sometimes the sophistication of silence. The oracle sipped tea and allowed the room to breathe. Then she gave the practical counsel that is the true work of prophets. "When they are older and have stopped turning shoes upside down for sport," she said, "find tutors who will not confuse talent with holiness, not just for the 2 with apparent titles, for all 3. Teach them to laugh and to do sums and stand up for themselves. Teach them to be bored without burning anything down. Let their play continue to braid itself across lines adults believe are walls. All should help one another. Magic is tidier when it is shared. When the time comes, and you will know when the time comes because pretending not to will make no difference, let them go seek what is waiting for them on the road to becoming themselves. If you bar the door, they will go through the window with scorn." Raina had been studying the oracle with the gaze that makes small creatures unnerving. "My mate?" she asked suddenly, because her father had told her the story of the knight and the dragon like a fairy tale, and she knew what she was to be now. A dragon. And a dragon must have a mate. The old woman did not startle. "A dragon," she agreed solemnly. "One awakened late. He will come to you as a wild beast. You will need to catch him and help him find the man he was before the beast claimed him. It will be a long lesson for both of you." Marius, who could not be outdone by Raina, said, "My queen," as if ordering a gem he had been promised. "Eastern," said the oracle with unexpected seriousness in her voice, hidden away a secret princess. "Try to stand, not run." Rafe did not ask a question. The oracle smiled at that as if the girl had just passed an exam no one else had known was being given. "Grow," she said to her instead. "Grow and watch and learn when to speak and, more importantly, when not to. The next edge between fate and choice will be put into your hands one day. Not for a long time. Do not borrow trouble. It will be delivered to your door packed into a white silk gown when it is ready." There was a rearrangement in the air then. the sort that says the speaking part is almost done and the listening part should begin. Then she looked at Elisa. The next oracle will find you before she finds me. You will know when you meet her by her eyes. They will not see light, but will see you. I will come again, when the time is right for her to be me. Elisa nodded. The oracle turned as if to go and then paused with her head slightly tilted, the way birds do when hearing a sound no one else thinks is there, locking her gaze on Alaris. "Walk with me," she said without looking to see if Alaris would obey. He did. They went no farther than the shadow of the gate, which was far enough to become private without performing a spectacle. She did not touch him. She looked at him the way one looks at a map when making sure of a path you have taken before. "The prophecy I gave to your mate," she said, as if picking a thread out of a sleeve, "had two paths parting ways at your choice. Do you want to see the other end, the path you did not take?" she asked quietly. Alaris pondered it for a moment, then nodded. "It does not matter now, and I have no regrets. But when my years draw out beyond my loved one's time and resentment crawls in, I might regret not facing the other path." The oracle nodded then and gently touched his forehead with a single finger. Alaris reeled for a moment, seeking support of the nest's walls, as a future that almost was flooded his mind. It was not a gentle thing to receive or hold, and he knew with absolute certainty that he would tell Elisa as soon as it was too painful to hold alone. The oracle went then, not vanishing. A woman who has walked uphill for years does not waste a perfectly good path, but taking the path downward with the steady satisfaction of a person who has delivered the right parcels to the right doors. She left the teacup on the sill for Solara to reclaim, because prophets who put things away properly are the only kind worth having. In the courtyard, the children resumed their very important work. Raina caught her shadow again and patted it to make up for the indignity. Marius made his windmill turn without his hands and then stopped it because stopping a thing is as useful as starting it. Riff took her tower apart and rebuilt it one stone wider at the base because you should never trust a thing not to fall until you have taught it how to stand. The nest listened and filed the morning under weather, family, and instructions for later. Above, the mountain took the news with its usual lack of commentary. Below, the city went on being itself, which is as much as can be asked of cities. Chapter 9. The Future That Never Was. That night, when the house had settled into the soft arithmetic of sleep, and the braziers kept its small red promises, Alaris gathered her in his arms and told Elisa what the oracle had pressed into him. He spoke as a man reports weather seen from a distant ridge, precisely without embellishment, because the truth had its own sharpness. The vision had come like a dream and not like one, no blur at the edges, only the clarity of a path not taken. In that other line of the world, he had chosen duty over heart, and the square had soaked in her blood. They laid the dragon at the city gates because a beloved must be mourned where all can see, and High Pass did not take that death quietly. The wind howled itself hoarse. Grief learned to carry a blade in a single night. Kataran kept his promise, but Annlena that he was to take home was not the girl who had left. The backwash of that day blackened more than banners. Annlena did not crack, she hardened. She rode home in front of a horde that had no time to name itself anything but vengeance. The city behind her poured its love for their fallen dragon into fury and followed. Kataran's weather set its jaw, forgot the games it had played with flags and market awnings, and went to war to avenge the one who had been both mother and friend to him. Even the streets seemed to learn a new angle, a slope more suited to marching than to market carts. Alaris told Elisa in a reverent whisper how he followed her to the north, a broken knight forbidden to die. Annlena had said, "No!" in the same voice one tells a dog to leave a fallen scrap, seeing his intent as they laid her to rest. "Don't you dare, Alaris of the Lakes!" I promised her, she added with cold fury, and he obeyed because obedience was all that was left to him. He proved loyalty in the currency that the world he had created understood. He went with her to the hall that had held their pasts and took what lives he was told to take by her order. He killed her father. He killed her brothers. He stood, afterwards, one step behind the throne as Katerin crowned his queen, and did not weep because weeping had not been commanded. The north bowed to the queen, rose at her command, and marched south. At the southern court, Katerin did not hesitate at doors that had once shut him out and broke them down. He claimed his birthright not as a prodigal, but as a verdict. Annlena stepped to his side, put the crown of the south, his father's blood still in bright red droplets on it, on his head while his mother watched, sipping bitterly, from a cup of poisoned wine, Katerin's last kindness to the woman who had left her to die in the wastes. Together they created an empire of cruel power. They called the joined realm Elysia, in her honour. The king of the south and the queen of the north ruled from High Pass with an iron hand, not because they had forgotten kindness, but because kindness had become a language the world punished. Roads grew safe, prisons grew full, maps looked cleaner. The hands that held them did not. He told how he stood through those years with the steadiness habit made of bone. At the end, when the conquest had learned to call itself order, and High Pass was already long used to being called the capital, Annlena released him from her service. She did it on a day the two worlds shared, this day, the day children were given their prophecies. In this world, they slept warm under stone built to hold them, but in that world, the two the nest was built for had not existed. Alaris told her quietly how he went from that hall to the gate and ended himself there, in a grave he had dug for himself next to hers, as a last obedience offered to himself. The oracle had been present there too, had stood next to him as he was digging and offered him the same courtesy, to see the other end. He had refused, for it did not matter any more to the man at the end of his road who had no doubt left that he had made the wrong choice. He did not ask forgiveness of the woman he loved as he finished speaking. There was nothing to be forgiven. He had not been that man. He had made a different choice. He did not ask to be comforted either. He set the other path down between them like a sword returned to its scabbard. Eliza listened the way dragons listen to changes in air. She leaned her head against his chest. Their child in the next room turned once in her sleep, rustling the quilt. The house breathed. She kissed him gently, thanking him for choosing this world. Having seen it, Alaris knew, cleanly, without the bargaining men sometimes make with time, that whatever came, however long his years stretched past those he loved, whatever losses he would have to bear, there would be no regrets. He had looked down the road that might have been and found it ended in a world immeasurably darker than this one. This one ended in stone taught to hold and hands taught to open, and in the sun shining over playing children. He chose it again, in the quiet, and the choosing remade him.